So this is our last one for the financial year in our monthly series of webinars. All right, so today we wanted to talk about something which is, I don't know, not often discussed in collaboration, but I think incredibly important, something we keep coming across in our own work and seeing clients. It's how do we, if collaboration means to work together, and yet someone owns the project, how do we give up? How do we share control in a way that maintains control? And so it's often something of the dilemma. Where we, just to ground this conversation, we have over the last few months been talking about some key steps of collaboration: sharing the problem, defining the dilemma, sharing the direction, which is about light on the hill and getting that agreement of where we're going, and sharing actions, which is about how do we work together to find solutions. So that's sort of where we've been over the last few months. Today's topic about sharing control really is relevant everywhere in all of these steps. It's how do we do that in a way that invites others in. So today's a bit of a look at that. So this dilemma I mentioned, we, as the people responsible for delivering projects, you know, it's my job description to get this project done, to deliver the work. And at the same time, I want to do this collaboratively. So I want others to own the outcomes and, you know, feel like they've been a part of it. So it is a bit of a cleft stick. How do I manage this, deliver the project, and take responsibility for that and make sure we get outcomes, while at the same time making sure everyone's on that journey, feels control of it, feels ownership of it. I wonder, is anyone feeling that dilemma? Is that familiar to you? Does it resonate in your experience? Any thoughts? You can drop it into chat or just jump in. Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing is that if you own the outcomes, then you also contribute to the outcomes, because, you know, the worst thing is kind of, well, everyone collaborates on their ideas, but they don't want to actually put in the work.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
So that's interesting, isn't it? People want to own the ideas, but they're not willing to put in the work. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I just meant to say that you just want to ensure that everyone, you know, if it's true collaboration, that they do all kind of pull their weight equally, that you don't kind of, you know, get left with all the, you know, like, yeah, with all the work to do.
I think something I constantly hear from people is that frustration of, yeah, they seem to want to work, but I seem to end up with everything.
Yeah.
So yes, I guess that's part of the responsibility that often you feel. Why have I got to do it all? I really want them to own the outcomes, and there's probably a tension there. Well, yeah, but I am responsible for the outcomes, but yeah, it feels it's dumped on me sometimes rather than them stepping up.
But of course, I mean, that can be good housekeeping at the end of a meeting or something like that, just to make sure everyone's, you know, did you go over the actions and who's responsible for what? And, you know, that should work itself out, hopefully.
Yeah, indeed. That's good. That's a good tip. I wonder if, Fran, you see, as I have seen clients, and I felt this myself, when people aren't stepping up, taking accountability, there's tasks to be done, I see clients, well, one of the responses then is just to sort of do it all, you know, pick it up and get that done. But of course, you know, that undermines the very thing you're looking for, isn't it? The ownership, the fingerprints.
That frustration sometimes drives that action, doesn't it, Stuart?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we step in, we fill the gap. You know, nature abhors a vacuum.
That's right.
And if our collaborators aren't stepping up, then the tendency is for us to do that. And you know, the boss wants outcomes, and the project deliverables have to be met. We feel responsible for delivering this. sometimes I see people saying, well, I am the expert in, let's say it's water management or, you know, natural resource management. So it is up to me to make this happen. So there's lots of reasons, aren't there, why we step in and do this. At the same time, knowing that the more I step in, well, the less others are stepping in, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a risk, isn't it, that you will actually take away the power from them unconsciously by wanting to get on. Yeah, leave people feeling less empowered and perhaps less part of it. So their fingerprints are less on it than you would hope.
And Jen in chat said people come to these things not understanding the meaning of the word dilemma. So I wonder, it'd be nice, Jen, I presume you haven't got your microphone working yet, but what's the implication of that for this discussion? You might drop a few words into chat there as well. What does that mean? How does that play out? Yeah, okay, so mine's still not working. So take a minute to do that if you choose to. So any thoughts? Well, how we see this play out is in making stuff happen. All right, well, the group's not stepping up, so it's up to me, I'll do it. We tend to collaborate to rather than collaborating with. And if I want to, you know, I always think of this thing as potentially the collaboration steamroller.
Yes, that's right.
And we kind of, it's hard to get out of the steamroller and make stuff happen. You know, I'm just going to roll over you in my steamroller called collaboration because, you know, you're not stepping up. So there's only one way to go, and that's kind of my way. So rather than doing this with, we end up doing things to, which is obviously not what we want to do. Does that ring true for people?
I'm sure we've all experienced things like that. Reckon, Janine? Yeah. We sit very close.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Of course, it never sounds like a steamroller. I hear the word, oh, we're just going to roll out the program. But, you know, it probably feels a bit like it to perhaps some of the people you're trying to collaborate with. They feel, well, this is less, it seems to be more about you and less about me. And it's well-intentioned. It's not deliberate. I think it's just a consequence of the frustration, perhaps, of the drive that we feel, the ownership we have of it. So I think it's important to recognise that we're doing the right thing here, but sometimes it has that unintended consequence, perhaps, of making it a little less with and feels the participants to more, well, it didn't feel as collaborative as I was hoping.
And of course, participants conspire, don't they? Because it's easier, as I think, Fran, you said, to sit back and let the Frans of the world, who are so capable, you know, is so good at delivering projects and looks like she's got it in control. And, you know, the less we do, the easier it is for us. And look at that team go, aren't they terrific there? So we do conspire in it, and the more they're doing that, of course, the more we step in and fill those gaps. But of course, as you say, it's easy then at the end to say, well, that's not what I thought was going to happen. You know, as a stakeholder, that's not where I thought I was going. One of the other things we see happening, and I think the drivers for exerting control over our collaboration, is we get a bit scared by where this looks like it's going, by the divergent thinking. We get in a room and strangely enough, people have got ideas, and strangely enough, those ideas are often different and there's disagreement, or there's, you know, differing directions. We're sort of getting further apart rather than closer together. And our tendency at that point, I think a natural tendency, and I feel this myself, is to try then and wrangle, you know, assist, find a way to help the group on that second picture come to some sort of agreement. Let's get to a point, because this looks like we're not getting anywhere. So let's find a way to find agreement. We sort of push for convergence, for consensus, for an end point in our discussion. Is that fair to say, John?
Yeah, I think it's certainly that experience of we need to get an answer. We need to find a solution. Let's move on. We can't waste too much time. You know, this collaboration sometimes just ends endless talk. So let's get to somewhere. So a tendency sometimes to manage the divergence by encouraging people to move towards some convergence. But sometimes it might be a little early. It's a rush. And sometimes that rush, perhaps it's seen as helping get there, you know, it's that control tendency that sometimes we might rush to get to the outcome.
And even if we're consciously not trying to rush, we're trying to help the group, aren't we? We're trying to help the group get to agreement, get to a point, get to a conclusion. And that's useful and necessary, of course. But it can sometimes be experienced as control, and in fact, it can be us driving for what we think is the right thing to do, which is, you know, an outcome, a point, a decision at this point.
And it's not necessarily just the outcome on content; it can be an outcome on process. We need to move this process forward. So even though you're thinking, well, I'm staying away from pushing the outcome, you still might push the process a bit to the way you think it needs to be done together, rather than allowing people get their fingerprints on the process as well as the content.
That's right. When this is a model that we have come across, and I carry it in my head all the time. It's better practice for collaboration, and a model that allows us to let go of that control a bit is to sit in the fire, to recognize what is called the groan zone, the hard work, the difficult work, the uncomfortable, the messy, the doesn't feel like it's getting anywhere work. And if we're able to sit there and not try and drive too early for the outcome, the decision, the what are we going to do next, then, you know, we are less controlling. We are letting go a little bit and helping the group sit in that place and actually do the work and have the hard conversations that need to be had. And ultimately, of course, we have to get to a point, but we do that when it feels right and when we are all closer to that point.
And I think the challenge of the groan zone is that it feels uncomfortable. It feels like we're wasting time. Feels like we're not getting where we need to get to. So for somebody in charge of this or with responsibility for it, it can be a difficult place to just sit with that uncertainty. But often the uncertainty, the conversation there is an important part of being able to basically have those people we say we want to collaborate with to actually really contribute. Because sometimes that authentic collaboration only comes from the listening, the conversation, the working through the difficult issues. So it's a challenging place at times when you haven't practiced living with that uncertainty, because I need to get there. You feel like you're losing control, and sometimes allowing the group to find the answer is what you need to do in those complex spaces. And the groan zone is where you're allowing that. Now, you don't want it to last forever, absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the frustrations. And experiment a bit. So it's actually, well, I think we're trying to converge. You might say, oh, hang on, maybe I just need to let this settle. No, we got there quite quickly. So I think there's no rule about when you start to converge. It's what makes sense, and you might want to try and go back and try again. But keep in mind that there's an important piece there about allowing a bit of divergence in the complex spaces so you can then get faster convergence.
Yeah, and I feel this tendency for sure, the need to rescue people. I had a client once working on water down in Victoria and set up a really good collaborative group, and they were just starting to work together. They got a bit stuck on what should we be tackling? How are we going to do this? What should we be doing next? And there was some disagreement. They were starting to get further apart. It looked like this fabulous collaboration they built was at risk. And Julie was talking to me, and we talked about the growing zone, and she acknowledged her strong desire to fix, to rescue would be the word, to rescue the group. But she sat with it for a little longer, and out of those discussions came, well, why don't we do this and this, and the group sort of got through it. And as a result, they're more resilient, they're more capable, they kind of recognize that it's hard work, but that they can survive the hard work. So the tendency to rescue is a control tendency, even though it's incredibly well-meaning. It can manifest as, well, let me do this for the group.
I had a council chief executive officer at a meeting where we were allowing a group to have a conversation to decide the way forward, and the boss came over to me and said, "Hey, John, that group over there, that's not an issue that matters. We should be just going in there and telling them to move across here." And I said, "Give it a minute." And 2 or 3 minutes later, the group came over to me and said, "John, this isn't really an issue. We're going over and moving over here." So, he wanted to rescue them, but he didn't need to, because they were able to work it out, and probably better than him in terms of what mattered. But that pause was really important, because if you'd gone over there and you need to stop that, what would you do naturally? You'd probably react and resist and say, no, we're going to concentrate on this one. So it could have been counterproductive, that desire for control.
Yeah.
So, and it's a good segue, John, to this, that first dot point, do less. The tendency is always to do more, do something with the group. But I have found that sometimes the less we do, the more useful we can be. So do less and let the group come to its place.
I've written a couple of blogs about, I get migraines occasionally, and sometimes I've actually been facilitated with a migraine. And what a migraine does, it actually stops me intervening, because I'm just trying to look after my own painful head, and I sometimes don't intervene. I'm just sitting there hoping that it'll go away and they'll do the work, and they actually do. So it actually reduces that tendency to jump in and help and control, etc. Because you're so that was a good learning for me about do less, achieve more.
Yeah, it's much like, isn't it, John, when we're running meetings or workshops online like this, sometimes you just can't, when the group is all in a room at the other end, and they've got this audio tech, and they can all hear themselves, but we over here can't hear very well. So we're trying to run this show, and yet we can't really hear what the conversation is. Sometimes it can make us much more useful, because we nod and smile and give them permission to have the conversation they need to have, without trying to control things. And it's surprising how effective that can be. Turn the sound off.
Well, I mean, you are collaborating after all, aren't you? So that's the whole idea. There's no point going in there with other people if you don't let them, contribute.
Yeah, I guess
on an equal footing.
Absolutely. There's no point doing it, but sometimes we just can't help ourselves. It's that unconscious desire to get there and help them get there and get there.
And it works both ways. So we can't help ourselves, and often they, whoever they are, can't help looking for guidance and leadership. This is hard work. Can someone
help John? Why aren't you contributing? So you've got pressure as a facilitator that you should be fixing this for us. And of course, what's our natural tendency? Well, we want to help and be useful, and you pay me to do this, so I'd better help you. Sometimes that's actually less useful. And one of the things, I think the second one, make visible your control dilemma. I mean, actually let people know the issue for you. The issue is, I think I need to intervene here, but I know that I don't need to. So when you see me doing it, put your hand up and say, "Hey, John, shouldn't we be struggling with this?" rather than you fixing it. Okay. So you can actually give the group permission and yourself permission to help all of you manage that control tendency.
Yeah, that's good. I thought that second point was really relevant to that conversation too. Exactly right. It's just another dilemma to share. So, and it's a good practical tip, John, to invite the group to identify when we all might be, trying to control, trying to converge, get the group to do whatever it is we might do. So some other practical tips. I mean, there are a million of them, but obviously it's about co-designing. You know, it's about not saying, well, I know what's the best conversation, the most useful collaborative conversation from my position in my steamroller. It's saying, what do we need to do next?
What do you think we should do, rather than this is what I think, but what do you think? So that listening piece, I find that's hugely valuable, just to help design the agenda. Even if in the end you go with what you've got, it gets people's fingerprints on it. They've been heard, listened to, you've probably got some different ideas, but it reduces that tendency to think, I know what we should do.
Yeah. I think that the dot point with the numbers under it, that to me is the critical thing here. Whenever we're making any decision, or we are, you know, jointly or severally at a point where a decision has to be made about the process or the content, stop and ask the group and do it together, whatever that is. Get out of the steamroller and catch myself making decisions or acting on behalf of the group, even with the best of intentions. And sit in the groan zone, go slow to go fast. Don't keep having to revisit content or decisions because we didn't really make that decision. I didn't really agree. You know, sit in the fire for a bit, sit in the groan zone. It's where the work is. If we're in the groan zone, we're doing something useful probably. If we're trying to rush past it, we're doing something not useful. So go slow to go fast. One of the things I will share with you post this is just a little document that we put together. Some of you may have seen it before. The Collaboration Fairy Tale really says, that highlights the difference between the story we tell ourselves about how well we're collaborating and some of the dynamics that are really going on. So just some extracts from that. We tell ourselves we're considering their needs, but in fact, in that right-hand box, it feels like we're exerting control. We preference our worldview. You know, we talk collaboration, but are still doing stuff. We've got our hands on the levers. We have the power, so we get to ask the questions. There's a whole range of ways that we can subtly, subconsciously, and, you know, as a group conspire to be controlled or to be controlling. So this second box, that the one on the right hand side, is what we should be aspiring to here. Let go of our power, resist controlling, listen, make the power visible. So get it on the table and again invite the group into co-managing that power dynamic. So that's, I'll share that, and you can, there are some ideas there for you to think about. Well, are we doing this, or
and I think it's important, that power dynamic, because in most of the circumstances we probably face, there are the powerful and the less powerful people, and oftentimes the stakeholders feel they're less powerful in the dynamic. So we've almost got a natural power differential set up that makes it hard to not step into those controlling characteristics. Unconsciously, it's not deliberate. It's just stuff that might influence and get an opposite outcome to the one we're expecting to get. So, and I think the guide's not bad in terms of what we're thinking we're going for, and sometimes how people experience that, which might be different to our intent. Might say, oh, okay, I didn't realise that. What would I need to do differently in those circumstances?
So we're nearly done here. It just occurred to me, I came across this slide this morning, and I mean, really, this is what we're talking about, isn't it? It's having conversations rather than driving to the transaction, the doing of the work, the the outcome. Collaboration it requires us to be talking, listening, being curious, learning together, having those conversations. That builds the relationship, and that allows the transaction. So the more we control, the more we're actually driving to that third step, and the less time we're spending on the conversations relationship, which actually the fuel and the foundations of great collaboration. So look, that's all we wanted to say. Feel free to join us next time, but any questions or comments or thoughts or anything you wanted to touch on again?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much. That was good. It's just yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you very
Right.
much.
Jean or Jen, anything there? Terrific.
Okay. Well, happy new financial year.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks
Okay.
very much, everyone.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye bye.
And
Okay.
thanks, Jen. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.